and welcome. We're really happy to see all of you today and to launch a discussion about critically important questions concerning the college admissions process. Well, we'll undoubtedly discuss a lot of questions today. I'm first going to ask the big one, and it's kind of a rhetorical question. Why don't rich, stimulating, and transformative experiences in out-of-school STEM pre-college programs have greater impact on college admission decisions? In other words, how can we ensure that these critical experiences we know are helping our young people learn and grow, become part of the decision criteria for universities? Today is about beginning a conversation concerning how we can help ensure that these experiences carry weight in admissions decisions. And joining us today for this conversation is the STEM Push Network and some of its representatives. You might remember them from what seems like a decade ago when they came up on stage during the Cleveland convening and danced to Salt and Peppa's Push It. We were also taken with their dancing that we thought we should offer a little refresher about their work and its immense power and relevance now more than ever, frankly. So I'm going to begin with some introductions of the panelists joining us today. Before I do that, a few reminders. As always, we're eager for your questions, comments, and thoughts. Please post your questions in that question box that I was talking about before, and then please vote on the questions that you'd like to see answered. We very well may go to you to ask your own question, so be prepared to do that. To just kind of ask it again, we'll unmute your microphone and you can jump on and ask your question. We'll get to as many of those as possible. As always, we're recording today's webinar and we'll share a link in summary with you. So first up on our list of panelists is Dr. Allison Slinsky-Legg. She's the founding co-director for the Broadening Equity and STEM Center and principal investigator of the NSF Includes Alliance STEM Push Network. She's faculty in the Department of Biological Sciences in the Dietrich School of Arts and Sciences, University of Pittsburgh, and she's focused much of her efforts on designing and developing K-12 STEM education, outreach, and research programs that provide equitable access to university STEM. Allison, is this work, is it too early yet? Has this begun to change things at the University of Pittsburgh?
Hi, Jeremy, and hi, everybody. Actually, it's not too early, and in fact, it has. So it started to transform the conversation around STEM equity on our campus. And I can say that because as a result of this work, the university started the Broadening Equity and STEM Center, which didn't exist before all of this and was created to specifically support the STEM Push Network and the work that we're doing. And it's also changed the way that students from some of the pre-college STEM programs in our Pittsburgh area are reviewed by our admissions.
Allison, that's so cool. I'm sure you hear this too, but for those of you who don't have a lot of conversations with NSF, one of the things that they require as part of the applications is this focus on broadening participation. At the same time, what they've found is that people are really good at putting a paragraph in there and not really good broadly at actually broadening participation. So it's really exciting when it is actually happening in kind of tangible ways. Allison, thank you. I'm excited to learn more about the program and get a deep refresher here in just a few minutes. Next up, we have Vince Stewart. Vince is the executive director of the California STEM Network, a statewide coalition of business, government, community, and education partners committed to expanding science, technology, engineering, and math opportunities for all children in California. In this role, he also oversees the Bay Area STEM ecosystem. Vince has more than 2 decades of experience in public policy and was appointed by Governors Brown and Schwarzenegger to senior education policy positions. Prior to joining Children Now, he was vice chancellor for external relations for the California community colleges. Vince, have universities in California been receptive to the ideas of this push network? Is there pushback from them, or are they letting you push in? Am I going to use push too many times in this conversation?
No, and first, good morning, and thanks for the invitation to join you. This, I think, is an incredibly important topic of conversation. I would say the response here has been overwhelmingly positive. It has really enabled us to strengthen and build the community of practice that we're trying to establish here in the Bay Area. I think we're also able to strengthen the regional partnerships that we have with our neighboring ecosystems to the south and then to the east of us. And I think particularly now with the advent of COVID, the pre-college STEM programs and everyone involved, I think, is really able to lift up strategies to better serve students through distance learning and all the other challenges that we're facing as we're trying to ensure that they get the teaching and learning they so deserve and need.
Absolutely, Vince, and thank you for joining us as well. We're really excited about your kind of on the ground participation in this initiative. I know that when we have these conversations, the biggest questions are around, all right, great, it's an awesome idea, we love it, but what do we actually do? So I'm excited to dig into that with you, with your experience with Bay Area. And last but not least, we have Julius Moyo. Julius has been the manager of explainers since February 2019 at the New York Hall of Sciences Alan J. Friedman Center for the Development of Young Scientists. Julius is the point person for the youth staff, the explainers. I love that title, at the museum. Prior to the STEM Push Network, Julius has presented at convenings for numerous cross-sector initiatives aimed at closing the college attainment gap for first generation and other minoritized students in New York. Julius, a lot of our conversations over the last several months have been about equity and disequity, and touching to some extent on closing the college attainment gap. So it's really front of mind for all of us right now. What should we be doing? This is a hard question to ask you because probably you could talk about this for 45 minutes, and we don't have that. But what is a first step that we should all be thinking about for ecosystems that really want to have a hand in closing that attainment gap? What should they be thinking about?
Great. Thanks so much, Jeremy. Thanks for the wonderful introduction, and thanks for having me today. It's been great collaborating with you and the rest of the team, and Vince and Allison as well. I'm looking so forward to this discussion. Maybe we will spend 45 minutes talking a little bit about that. I 100% feel right now is the time to talk to your youth, talk to the college-going program participants, particularly in this time where the college-going landscape is changing so rapidly, so are their lives. And so taking the time to take stock of their needs and a deeper understanding of how our programs can make connections for them and create opportunities where now may be a little bit more challenging than ever before to do so. So looking forward to the discussion and digging a little deeper into that.
Thank you, Julius. I'm looking forward to it as well. So let's do that. Let's start to dig in on this a little bit. So Allison, I was really excited to learn more about the STEM Push Network in Cleveland, but I'm really hoping that you can maybe give us an overview of the program. It was a while ago, and I don't remember the details. I just remember that it was exciting. So can you kind of break down for us what this looks like, what the goals are, and how this really sort of plays out to make this level of change in communities?
Thank you, Jeremy. I'd be happy to. I'm happy to be here today. Hello, everyone. I have the pleasure of being the person that gets to tell you all about the STEM Push Network, a little bit about why and how we started the work, and hope to tell you a little bit about what we have planned and how we hope to accomplish it. And so as everybody knows, you know, lack of racial and ethnic diversity in STEM is a national problem. And so in response, colleges, universities, organizations from across the nation have developed out of school time pre-college STEM programs for high school students as a solution. And these pre-college programs engage and prepare traditionally minoritized students in STEM fields through experiences that impart the skills, abilities, habits of mind that we know are predictive of success in STEM. And through a variety of assessment metrics, we've known for years that these pre-college STEM programs work. But the problem is that the diversity that we see in the pre-college STEM programs is not matched in undergraduate STEM majors, even sometimes at institutions that host those pre-college STEM programs. And that was my experience and how I got into this work. So I designed and ran a pre-college STEM program for years in which urban high school students would work in my lab to advance a current research project from our university. So we take part of an ongoing project from a lab. The deal is that the lab stops working on it for the summer. The pre-college program gets it, advances the work over the course of the summer. And then at the end of the summer, all of the data, products go back to the lab for further study. So they pick it up from there. And so you might imagine when we first suggested this program and the program first started, scientists at the university were super skeptical about the fact that high school students were able to contribute in any real way to their current science, let alone advance it, you know, for the lab. But years later, we actually have a wait list now of labs who want the program to take on a project from their lab. And that's because every year, these high school students are able to advance the work. So to be able to do that, the students have to learn to think analytically. They have to learn how to develop and test multiple hypotheses, to think about appropriate controls for experiments, to analyze data and results. They have to be able to communicate that science effectively. So writing skills, presentation skills. They have to learn a ton of background content to be able to understand the project and be able to contribute to it. And through this process, they develop strong relationships with mentors at the university. And all of that then contributes to their ability to advance science that's happening on our campus. But despite the success of the program, all of these unbelievable accomplishments of the students, one of the things that we were noticing was that this work was not helping to propel students in their own personal academic journeys. And so to be specific, I saw this with my students of color that were in the program. And so they were spectacular by every possible metric, but you know, their accomplishments in the lab and to our academic community were not being considered by admissions. And what it came down to is they were being triaged out of the queue by SAT scores. And so nobody even knew about the program and their accomplishments and all of that. And so it turns out that this is far too common. So university admissions practices often rely heavily on standardized test scores, which have been shown multiple times to be culturally and racially biased. Pre-college STEM programs offer a natural solution because they're successful in attracting and preparing, retaining minoritized students. But the problem has been for admissions that they have no way to evaluate one pre-college STEM program from another, right? There's too much variability and they can't tell which programs are preparing students effectively. And so because of this, pre-college STEM programs have remained an untapped resource by admissions. And so despite their ability to successfully prepare students for undergraduate STEM, they're not being leveraged to increase the number of underrepresented minoritized students admitted to undergraduate STEM programs. And so next slide. So the STEM Push Network, and PUSH stands for Pathways for Underrepresented Students to Higher Ed, is a national initiative that's trying to change that. And so what we're trying to do is change the admission system by providing an alternative, evidence-based metric that finally gives real weight to out-of-school time pre-college STEM programs and admissions decisions. And so again, the work of STEM Push started when a group of us at the university who all work on pre-college programs sort of got together around our common frustration that the exceptional accomplishments of our students were not being considered by admissions. And although we all work at the same university, I'd like to say to this audience particularly that these conversations didn't start off on our campus, and they in fact started off in a regional ecosystem convenings. So the Pittsburgh regional ecosystem is named Remake Learning, and we would attend Remake Learning convenings that would get us out of our buildings and our, our own units on campus and all together, power of an ecosystem convening. And we started to talk about this common frustration. And so we all teamed up with Remake Learning as our backbone organization and decided that we needed to do something to try to make our pre-college programs matter in admissions decisions. And so at that time, and so this was like 2016-ish, the National Science Foundation announced a bold new program called Includes. And so Includes is NSF's flagship broadening participation initiative. It's also one of NSF's 10 big ideas for future investments. And NSF has said that the success of Includes is vital because if we don't figure out a way to diversify our nation's STEM community, then all the other initiatives are gonna fail. And so we were initially awarded a pilot grant. And so this was a small grant for just 2 years through the Includes program to investigate this connection between pre-college STEM programs and university admissions. And we were able to generate some results. And so some of the things that we did, we conducted a community framework analysis that identified pre-college STEM programs as an effective bridge between urban communities and urban universities. And then we worked with our own admissions. They gave us 12 years worth of admissions and persistence data to analyze, and we were able to show just like other places have across the country, that SAT scores are failing as predictors of success in STEM. We developed a matrix of things that are predictive of success in STEM. So the skills, abilities, habits of mind that are predictive of success in STEM. And then we used all of that information to develop a set of evidence-based standards that serve as benchmarks for pre-college programs to broaden participation in STEM. And so we refer to these as our quality standards. And so again, the quality standards are a set of benchmarks that programs must meet if they're going to attract, retain, and rigorously prepare underrepresented minoritized students for STEM. And so these quality standards include a lot of things, things like, for example, recruitment practices, rigorous program assessment, program design. But one of the things that I want to mention is that they're centered on equity and the ability of programs to broaden participation in STEM. Next slide. Thank you. So that work helped us to develop our vision, which is being funded by the next level of NSF Includes Award, and that's an Alliance Award. And so STEM Push is creating the first nationwide network of pre-college STEM programs accredited for meeting quality standards for broadening participation. And so our vision is based on the following. If pre-college programs utilize research-based practices for broadening participation and can communicate that value to admissions, then more underrepresented students will gain admission and persist in STEM. Next slide. So the way that we're going to do this is with all of our partners. We're going to build both a powerful collaborative improvement space using a networked improvement community model, or NIC model, and a next generation, we're calling it a next generation accreditation model that will serve as a mechanism for communicating the power of pre-college programs to admissions. And so let's start with the accreditation part first. So admissions needs an evidence-based standard. So when we first started this work, we were thinking about badging, right? Badging students for completion of programs. But feedback from the admissions sector was that badges are difficult to evaluate because there's no underlying standard and there's too much variability between badges. And so accreditation is meaningful to admissions. And so we're working with Middle States Association to develop a next generation accreditation model that is based off of our quality standards. And so these quality standards are the framework. So to become accredited, pre-college STEM programs would then have to meet these evidence-based quality standards. But what's also important to us is building the first national network of pre-college STEM programs that are focused on equity and using their program power to broaden participation in STEM. So next slide. So with STEM experts, with culturally sustaining pedagogy experts, with representatives from higher ed admission space and researchers, we're going to form a networked improvement community that's designed to strengthen pre-college STEM programs along those quality standards first, right? And then work with Middle States to accredit those programs so that their value can be weighted in college admissions decisions. So this will change admissions review by providing an evidence-based and equitable supplement to our culturally biased standardized test-based system. I'd like to say that all of this work is embedded within the STEM learning ecosystem community of practice and is being done in conjunction with the National Science Foundation's Coordination Hub, and again brings together key partners from relevant sectors, accreditation sectors, access and admissions, STEM fields, but it keeps pre-college STEM programs right at the heart of all of this. I would also like to mention that this is also founded on a research agenda that will work to validate pre-college STEM programs outcomes on broadening participation, contribute to the field of knowledge for NICs, and sort of spread pre-college STEM program effective strategies and structures. So work has just started this year. And we're starting with 17 pre-college STEM programs that are clustered in 4 urban ecosystems as a start: New York City, Pittsburgh, Chicago, and the San Francisco Bay Area. The STEM learning ecosystem community of practice will identify new urban ecosystems to scale the work to include 10 during the course of this project. And we will work within those ecosystems to identify additional pre-college STEM programs so that hopefully by the end of the next 4 to 5 years, we have about 40 pre-college programs that have become accredited. And so I'm happy to be accompanied by 2 of my colleagues who can tell you more about this work from the STEM push from the ecosystem and pre-college program perspectives. But I wanted to start off just by giving you a general overview of sort of what the initiative looks like.
Allison, thank you. And I think a really important thing for everyone to be thinking about with all of this is the deep work that Allison and Vincent, Julius, and the team have done on the modalities needed to get this kind of change accepted by admissions departments. I think it's really easy for us to say, admissions is weird and it should be different and come up with these great ideas, but also it's a really established set of procedures that govern college admissions. And this work that this team has done is really, really powerful in making that shift. And that, I think, is perhaps one of the most exciting parts of the whole initiative, even though it might not be as flashy. So thank you, Allison. Vince Stewart is one of our leading ecosystem leaders, and not surprisingly, is playing a huge leadership role in the work of STEM Push Network. Vince, help us understand what you're doing with the STEM Push Network.
Yeah, absolutely. And Allison, thanks for that great lead in. I thought it might be helpful before getting into sort of my role in this work to give a little bit of background and context for the Bay Area STEM ecosystem, because I do think we're a little bit different than some of the others across the country and actually globally. So unlike other ecosystems, we actually do not provide direct services and supports to students. We support the organizations that engage in that work. So it really is supporting programs like PreCollege STEM Programs. And I would also want to note that we could not do what we're doing without the tremendous support and partnership of the Broadcom Foundation and Paula Golden, who I know many of you know, but she has been instrumental in our success here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So the Bay Area STEM ecosystem serves really 2 primary communities. It's San Francisco and San Mateo County, so right along there, the coast and just south of San Francisco proper. And in that work, we've identified 3 main priorities for what we want to accomplish in supporting, again, those direct service providers. And it really fits in with pre-college STEM, because in addition to focusing on teachers and their professional development and diversifying that profession and ensuring we're recruiting and retaining those folks, we want to support more students who are college going, college ready, and are successful within their desire to pursue and earn STEM credentials and certificates. So that's a key priority of the ecosystem itself. So moving into this partnership was not a stretch for us. The other piece that we're really focused on is how do we create regional alliances? We have the benefit of, just to the east of us, having our partner, the East Bay STEM Network, which is also part of the ecosystem's community of practice, as well as Region 5 STEAM that serves Silicon Valley, and another ecosystem. So the potential here is that what we are learning from this initiative and this partnership and pilot can really, I think, better serve students throughout a large geographic footprint within here, the greater San Francisco Bay Area, and the STEM, pre-college STEM programs that are participating in this initiative currently serve students in those regions. So I think it's important to sort of set that context and that foundation early. So next slide, please. So in terms of my role with the STEM Push Network, and I do think it's a little bit different for the reasons I just stated in terms of how we're going about our work in the Bay Area STEM ecosystem. But I've really sort of put it into these 4 buckets or 4 concerns, if you will. And as someone who comes out of the higher education community, spending a lot of my career within the University of California and our statewide community college system, I think I've got a perspective of sort of how to bridge K-12 and higher education in ways that not a lot of other folks have had the benefit and the fortune of being able to do. But in that work, I really view sort of one of the things that I can contribute is really prioritizing the interest and the needs of students. All too often I've seen where, not this work in particular, but just work generally, can get bogged down or sidetracked in terms of focusing on the needs of the institutions and what works best for institutions. And while we want to make sure that's part of the conversation, at the end of the day, what we're doing, I think, has to work for students. It has to be in their interest, something they can navigate successfully and ultimately achieve their educational outcomes and goals. So I always try and bring us back to that. The other concern for me is being a constant advocate for high quality pre-college STEM programs. We have a number of opportunities, fortunately, in our region and in our communities for students, but they have varying degrees of quality and varying levels of outcomes and objectives. So if we're going to better serve students, then it really is important, I think, to work with that community to ensure that we're providing the best opportunities for them that we possibly can. And that, to me, is really ensuring that folks have the benefit of the learning from an initiative like this to inform and improve their own practice. The third area for me that is really a priority is how do we create the support structures for successful pre-college STEM programs? And in my experience, a lot of that hinges on both institutional policies and resources and funding, particularly from the state. And one of the things that I've encountered over my time in higher education is both university systems and individual college campuses. They have a range of priorities that they're facing. And sort of our crisis isn't necessarily their crisis. So what can I do to push this work sort of further up that list of priorities and be as effective as the other constituencies who are advocating for their own initiatives? Because ultimately, I think for this to be successful, institutions need to see this work as central to their mission and to their goal of serving students, particularly those students who are from underserved groups and are underrepresented within our higher educational system. And that really sort of ties into ensuring that we have equity and access. And certainly the goal of this program is to ensure that we have greater diversity within those students who are pursuing and, most importantly, earning STEM majors. But we want to make sure, I think, that all students have that opportunity available to them, not just those that have already sort of demonstrated a level of aptitude or have already committed to being a STEM student, if you will, because I think we have sort of this untapped potential with a lot of kids who may not know that they have this passion within them and that they can do it, that they have the ability to be successful. And to me, a pre-college STEM program can be sort of the door that opens that up to them. And quite honestly, from my perspective, even if they're successful outside of STEM, if they're successful in post-secondary, to me, that's a win. Next slide, please. So in terms of what I see as the relevance of the STEM Push Network, which I think is key to having institutions view this as a priority, sort of the what's in it for them. Obviously, it is increasing diversity, having more students from underrepresented groups pursuing these degree credentials, ensuring that they have the supports they need within their educational institutions to be successful. They have access to tutoring and faculty and all of the other things that students, I think, across the board need, particularly those students who might be first generation and from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who just may not generally know how to navigate the post-secondary environment. The other thing that is incredibly relevant in my view about this work is, to me, it can level the playing field in college admissions. Right now, there are a range of opportunities that students have, particularly those students who have the means. AP courses being one, and in California, even access to our A to G course curriculum, which is needed to be eligible for our public four-year institutions. But to the extent that we can provide other opportunities for students to have something that they can do that benefits them in the college admissions process, I think is incredibly valuable. So that partnership between folks who traditionally have been kind of in the outreach environment within higher education, connecting more strongly and deeply with the admissions and eligibility partners, I think is incredibly important. And then here again, this notion of providing access to all students, for me is something I keep trying to come back to in this work. I think particularly as we look at what's happening with college admissions generally, the debate that's happening right now around SAT, ACT, certainly in our state, whether or not we have an alternative assessment for college admissions or no assessment and go completely test optional, then if something like a pre-college STEM program is elevated in the admissions process, then I really think it's incumbent upon us to ensure that there's ideally universal access. So all students can benefit from these programs if they want to, and then pursue their post-secondary goals. If we don't have that access, then I worry we potentially further exacerbate the opportunity gap where students have access to some resources and not others. And I think that's been a constant theme throughout our conversations in this work, and one that I'm quite honestly very pleased with. Next slide, please. In terms of what I hope to accomplish in our work here, both collectively as this group and then specifically to the San Francisco Bay Area and the region and the partners that we're working with, I want to increase awareness. I want to make sure that my ecosystem partners within the San Francisco Bay Area ecosystem are aware and knowledgeable of what's going on. I want to make sure that our other ecosystem partners in the region are aware of this work. And I want to engage with policymakers, because ultimately for us, it will be policymakers who can allocate the resources and make the changes in policy that remove barriers to these programs being successful. So I think that's certainly a priority for me. Again, I want to come back to this achieving greater access, particularly in this environment of COVID, where we have seen the division between the haves and have-nots really laid bare. So we're certainly dealing with issues like the digital divide. So all of the things that go into building and ensuring students have access to participate in these programs is really key. And then I also want to be able to disseminate best practices so that our partners really can look and see, how can I improve the quality of what I'm offering my students, where I'm doing things well, how can I even share that more broadly with the groups who are part of this initiative. Next slide, please. Then in terms of what I think others can learn and hopefully replicate, I think the data and the evidence from the pilots will be very powerful in helping you to make your case. And I hope that as you watch this work progress, that will be even more so. I think through this process, we will be able to identify what are those resources and supports that are needed for effective pre-college STEM programs. And then I think equally important is, how do you effectively engage and support students and their families, particularly those from underrepresented groups? Because there is this thought that if we build it, they will come, but we want to make sure that students and parents and families are demanding this, quite honestly, that they want their students to have this as a learning opportunity. And then to wrap up, at least for me, what can you do now? I think reach out to the pre-college STEM programs in your area and start to build those relationships now. Again, for us, we have tens, if not hundreds of programs, and we're actively trying to engage with them and doing that sooner rather than later. Find out what you can do to support those programs, find out what I think they need now, and see if that's something that you can provide for them. I would say also for those who, and even those who are not located on a college or university campus, reach out to the university admissions office and the student affairs and outreach offices now. Don't assume that admissions, and I don't mean this in any disparaging way to my higher education colleagues, but don't assume that admissions is necessarily in constant contact with those who are focused on outreach and student affairs. So help foster and facilitate those partnerships. And then as Allison mentioned, there's potential for growth here. So prepare now for the next cohort of those pre-college STEM programs and STEM ecosystems to participate in this effort, because I think you will be very pleased in the opportunities that are afforded here and what you can learn to help better serve and benefit students. So I will wrap up there and thank you.
Vince, thank you for that. We appreciate that. A couple people have asked in the chat what PUSH stands for. Allison, Vince, please tell me if I'm wrong. If I remember, I think Pathways for Underrepresented Students to Higher Ed. Am I close?
That's it.
I got it. All right.
Yep.
I was sitting there trying to remember, and that's what I came up with. All right, perfect. Julius, before we start on audience questions, will be going to those questions in just a few more minutes. What can you tell us about how, what can ecosystems learn, from the work that you're doing with your people?
Great, thanks so much, Jeremy. And Allison and Vince, thanks for taking us sort of along the road to this little bit of a closer look at how the pre-college STEM programs are participating in this work. So, many of us in this work have seen the PUSH network as really a timely extension of what we've already been doing. So reimagining possibilities for this next generation of the STEM workforce. This means connecting them to opportunities and social capital, leveraging their skills and talents and really allowing them to leverage the hallmarks of STEM learning in order to deepen their own 21st century skill development. So using making as learning, habits of mind, inquiry-based learning, and near-peer mentoring. At the Hall of Science, we have youth staff at the museum who are getting regular training around facilitation of science content, skill building around their science literacy, and of course, thinking more about their careers and how they fit into the mix of the STEM workforce. College is a major piece of that. And so we're connecting them both formally and informally to college as that sort of pathway to whatever their next steps may be. At the Hall of Science, we're lucky enough to have an alumni coordinator who works specifically with our high school college-bound students. And many programs have talked about, many programs in the New York City ecosystem have talked about the various ways in which they're engaging in these personalized and really meaningful conversations and supports to and through college for their youth. On the next slide, I thought I'd share a little bit more about how the PUSH network has impacted our work. So first and foremost, we're getting a deeper understanding as pre-college STEM programs about our role as a conduit between youth and college. So we're doing that by sharing best practices. And we can actually head to the next slide and folks can follow along a little bit. But we're sharing best practices. We're sharing our data. A lot of us have been building evidence-based programs, program models for some time now, and learning from each other, participating in this network of like-minded programs, but also like-minded professionals has been integral to our own growth as pre-college STEM programs. More importantly, we're also talking with folks who have not been maybe at our tables before. So the cross-sector approach to the PUSH network, first and foremost, has connected us to admissions professionals. So learning about the work that they're doing and the needs and demands of this other group of stakeholders of this work has been integral to my understanding as well, and our program understanding of how we make these connections for our young people. I've never heard an admissions professional say they want to make getting into college harder, right? And so working with them to understand some of the systems changes that we can implement as a network has been one of the joys of participating in the PUSH network. So we're a network of learners. We're engaging in many of these reflective practices that we are imbuing onto our students, and we're taking some critical steps towards constant and continual change management activities. As such, staff time is accounted for. And so the modest investment by the PUSH network in funding staff time has also allowed us to take more time to allocate towards the work. Next slide. So I wanted to share a little bit about my own personal experience in the PUSH network. First and foremost, it's really challenged my understanding of these systems. Being part of a nationwide effort of this scale has allowed me to get a deeper understanding into all of these stakeholders' needs. And this has really occurred through that sort of transparent and candid information sharing and reflection activity that I was speaking a little bit about before. I also benefit from the sort of centralized relationship management, making connections with my ecosystem partner programs, allowing us to broaden our work by these shared accountability measures, and these regular convenings that are facilitated are really sort of a perk that you cannot go without highlighting. So we all know how the demands of this, not only the transition to virtual program, but some of our regular programming needs can make it hard to grow our networks professionally and also in service to our students. So the hub team's facilitation of that has been really great. And as well, being able to participate in these reflective exercises that have been aiding in the formation of the network's priorities. We talked a little bit, Allison mentioned a little bit about the quality standards, that the network has devised, and taking some time with my own team and my colleagues to take a deep dive and look at our work, but then zoom out and look at how we're moving towards, full execution of these measures has been both professionally enriching and also hopefully enriching to our progress as a program. On the next slide, I talk a little bit about that. So, this summer with the implications of programming in the context of COVID-19, having this cross-sector learning community was so critical. We took some time at the very beginning of summer to take stock of what was going on in each of our individual programs, take stock of conversations we were having with our youth, and then check back in throughout the summer in order to monitor these sort of high intensity change management cycles. Recently, I spoke with one of my colleagues at Summer STEM at Cooper Union. Elizabeth Walters was talking a little bit about her work with her youth in the context of COVID and this virtual learning. She ended up being able to increase the amount of youth mentors who could participate with her younger staff because of their access and ability to understand some of the programming mechanisms that were already in place, and also their own technological literacy that was able to aid in the growth of her younger youth participants. We also conducted numerous guided self-studies around our own goals, but not just our goals, but our program capacity and the resources that we have in order to move our work forward. So again, as I mentioned at the Hall of Science, we have a alumni coordinator. Many of our, programs in our ecosystem, the alumni would be referred to as the college participants. But our college participants in our program have this connection to this person who can talk to them about their needs and how the college process is going and how they're navigating the change and transition. So conducting this self-study around where we could improve that work and grow that work, but also where we're doing things really well, it has been really great this summer. And the accreditation-like processes that the PUSH network are implementing are allowing us to more effectively partner with colleges as well, again, through this deeper understanding of their needs and priorities. The next slide, so from the student perspective, we have new approaches for better understanding student needs. As part of our assessment process this spring, we conducted interviews with some of our program participants. What I learned from those interviews blew me away. We talked with college participants who, two of which had recently transitioned majors, and both of which identified a portion of our program that we often tend to think about how to reshape and maybe even move across to other portions of our work. So we have STEM nights where we're allowing students to network with STEM professionals and college admissions folks. These have been a part of our program for some years now. And in the context of COVID, we had to really think about the ways in which that we can still implement these programs and maintain value for those program participants. Don't you know, in the interviews, both participants mentioned that the STEM nights were integral to their ability to transition majors effectively in their college because they had met point people, these college professionals, during their STEM nights prior to applying to college. So hearing that firsthand and being able to factor that into decisions, program decisions that we're making was really, really great. And having both the tools and also just the support, so networking, as well as conversation supports, we were able to implement some of these small change cycles in our programs quickly and early on. I also talk a lot about the language and the approaches for securing these resources and stakeholder buy-in. So learning a little bit about the way that the college admission process works and the ways in which we are more closely understanding it to sometimes disenfranchise our minoritized students has been critical in the ways that we provide our students the tools in order to overcome some of these hurdles or preempt them, especially in the context of COVID-19. So as we look towards a more mixed measures approach to understanding eligibility and admissions criteria, we're now already a step ahead of ourselves and able to predict some of the needs and some of the ways that students can talk about themselves in this sort of new format of college application process. What are the next steps? So some of you are here today already. I saw in the chat a great question, what can I do now? One of the first things I think we can all do as practitioners is continue cultivating relationships with each other. Some of our pre-existing program partners, but also new program partners, seek out new opportunities to make connections and get a deeper understanding of the college-going work and support that our colleagues are doing. I never say you have to reinvent the wheel, right? So, and then also get to know your college stakeholders. The admissions folks are very much in a transition the way that we are as well. So get a deeper understanding of what they're looking for, get an understanding of ways that you can connect your students to them, and really talk about all the things that we allow our students to reflect upon, their STEM confidence, STEM literacy, and allow them to talk about them with these college stakeholders as well. Embed reflective practices in your program. We ask this so much of our youth, and practicing this as well allows us to better assess our own impact on their progress towards their goals.
So Julius,
lastly,
I hate to interrupt you, but I want to get to a couple questions if that's okay. And we'll make sure to, questions, look at that. I just want to make sure to get to a few. And everyone who's on right now, just so you're aware, a couple of things. Number one, questions that we aren't able to get to today because we run out of time. We'll get those questions to the panelists so that they can answer those in their own time and get those out to you as well. I can also tell you that I'm hearing from Alyssa and Veronica that the next session in this, which we'll talk about here in a second, is going to be really focused on conversation and Q&A from you. We just wanted to make sure to get the kind of baseline set with the information from the past year from our three really great panelists. So while we are looking towards the future, I would like to get a few questions in now. Vanessa had a couple of questions that were both really highly voted. Vanessa, I'm hoping we can do a speed round and hear a couple of your questions for our panelists to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Vanessa. I'm with Louisiana State University. We have a pre-engineering STEM pathway. And I know it's not easy to get admissions to change at your own school, but it's certainly easy when you are employed by that university to get them to accept a program that you've maybe developed. But how are schools outside of your actual schools being receptive to these pre-STEM programs that aren't developed internally by a university?
So if it's okay, I can jump in first, and then Vince, Julius, you guys can feel free to jump in as well. So hi, Vanessa, and thank you for that. Thank you for that question. So the first thing is that it was not as easy as you would think to get our own university to recognize the value of our pre-college program. These programs have been in existence for decades and haven't been valued until lately in this sort of systematic way. I think that one of the things that we have to be able to do, because it is an issue where now our university recognizes our programs, but what about kids that are in these other programs? And so I think my response to that is that we have to do several things all at the same time. First, that we have to do the work, right? We have to be able to, through this research program, validate and communicate the value of programs, right? To on a large scale, be able to show that pre-college programs do prepare students to be able to be successful in undergraduate STEM programs. And so in addition then to doing that work, we have to be able to, again, communicate the work and get admissions to listen. And so part of that, I think is the power of being able to work through ecosystems, having this work embedded in STEM learning ecosystems, and having ecosystems that have connections with both pre-college programs and with higher ed admissions and can talk about that work. So as we're doing the research and we're getting the results, right, to be able to show that these programs on a large scale are effective at preparing students for STEM, and to be able to talk about this accreditation model, that then all of this information can get pushed out through ecosystems to be able to connect this. I have to say that we have some higher ed admissions folks on board already, and they're connecting us with their admissions organizations, their national admissions organizations, and we're starting to talk about this. Now's a good time, right? Because of the pandemic, everything that's happening, admissions is kind of flipped up on their heads. And so, it's a good time to be starting this conversation.
And Vanessa, can you ask your other question?
Yeah, thanks for that answer. I didn't mean to imply it was easy at your own institution, just that it was maybe perhaps easier than at other institutions.
Comparatively.
Yeah, comparatively. So my second question has to do with how far along the accreditation process is as far as developing those standards, and how an organization would join that conversation to kind of help develop those standards and be part of that conversation in actually creating the standards, not just applying them after they're done.
And to add to that, Allison, there have been several people in the chat who've said as well that type of work is really interesting to some of the people listening. They'd love to be voices or reviewers or co-authors on those standards. So how can people get involved?
Get in touch with us is the quickest, easiest answer. And so, like I said, well, the quality standards as they exist now came out of work that was done in the previous includes award, and it's evidence-based, it's based on stuff that's in the literature, right? But they will evolve. They're part of this is a research project. And so, if you look at the way that the whole work is structured, we want different voices, multiple voices from all relevant sectors to be involved in this work, so that these quality standards can be tested and validated and can evolve during the course of this work. And so if you're interested in being involved in this, if you're interested in any of this work, get in touch is the short answer.
Thank you.
I'm muted. I know that from the people that I know that have reached out to you, this team has been incredibly responsive. So I think that's a really great answer for everybody who's wants to participate or has some deeper questions. Hey, Patty Curtis, if you're there, you've got another question that was pretty highly voted that I'd like to try to sneak in real quick here right before the end, right before the buzzer. Patty, are you there with us?
Yeah. Hi, thanks, Jeremy. Thanks to the panelists. Great presentation. Really excited to hear about PUSH expanding into sort of a hub and multiple institutions. That was my first question. So thank you for answering that. And then I guess you talked about badges and accreditation. I wondered if your team have looked at sort of blockchain student records. as a way to track student performance and activities, learning over time.
So at this stage, is blockchain part of your program in terms of not in terms of learning, but in terms of managing the actual student records?
So can you say any more about that? I'm unfamiliar.
Okay, I am not the expert on this. I did post a little bit from the Department of Education. It's a type of technology that gives ownership to the individual rather than having students have to go to the university to get their transcript or to another provider that might provide some certification or credential. This would all be maintained in a protected environment that a student can build their portfolio as they accumulate experiences, whether it's, you know, a university, a pre-college experience, some other online Coursera, whatever. So it's just it's a technology to help students build portfolios across a lifetime.
Yeah, so thank you, Patty. So at this time, no, that's not anything that we're considering. So we're looking at it from being able to credential the pre-college program with an accreditation, and then have those recommendations from those programs be weighted in admissions decisions.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Allison, Julius, Vince, and thank you, Patty, for that question. As I mentioned, there are a whole bunch of really great questions from Mark Vaughn and Gwen and all sorts of folks, and we'll get those to the three of you. There are also people asking if it would be okay, and I already know the answer is yes, for us to share some contact information for the three of you when we send out those summaries so that people can reach you. This has been a conversation about the STEM Push Network. Thank you, Allison, Vince, and Julius for your time and insights. STEM Push Network invites you to learn more about its work for systemic change and post-secondary college admissions to broaden STEM participation by creating a national alliance of accredited pre-college STEM programs. And like I said, from just scanning the chat, I know you have a whole bunch of takers here. This is critical work, and we're really excited to have you all explore it with us. Please stay tuned for more information and make sure to sign up for the next session, which will be September 16th at 1 o'clock Eastern, where we'll have more time to really dig into your questions and get more feedback from the panel now that we've kind of laid that groundwork. My name is Jeremy Shore, and thank you all for joining us today.